The biggest lie you've been told is that being good makes you free. But the truth is that often, what you call virtue is just a sophisticated mechanism of obedience. Since childhood, you have been shaped to please. You were praised when you yielded, punished when you dared to be yourself. You were taught that the right thing is to sacrifice, to be silent, to nullify yourself. That the noble thing is to serve, to swallow your own truth, to keep your head down and call it humility. And over time, you learn to take pride in it, to call character the fear of taking a stand, to call kindness your inability to say no. The world loves the obedient. Society reveres those who follow rules, who adapt, who repeat. But it despises and fears those who dare to create their own path. And that's why Nietzsche disturbs. He doesn't offer you comfort. He throws you into the abyss. He doesn't tell you what is right. He forces you to question why you think it is. And when you read Zarathustra, you are not reading a philosophy manual. You are hearing a voice that burns everything you thought you knew about virtue, morality, sacrifice. This video is a confrontation, a mirror you may not want to face, but need to. Because if you live trying to be a good person, you might be living a farce. You may have adapted so much to others' expectations that you forgot who you really are. And this is not about defending vulgar selfishness or romanticizing arrogance. It's about something much deeper. It's about authenticity, about power, about living from yourself, and not from what others expect of you. Nietzsche understood something brutal. The morality of the herd was not made to free you. It was made to domesticate you. It was made to keep you predictable, submissive, harmless. And your so-called virtue may be exactly that, a habit of shrinking, of hiding behind what is socially accepted, of pretending to be noble when in reality you are just afraid. Do you want to know why this hurts? Because deep down you know there is something in you that wants to explode, that wants to create, transgress, say what you think, live with strength, intensity, truth. But you don't let it. You hold back. You freeze. Because you learned that this is wrong, that this is ego, that this is dangerous. For Nietzsche looks into your eyes and says, then let it be dangerous. True virtue is not the one that fits in. It is the one that overflows. It is not the one that follows the rule. It is the one that reinvents it. And if this video serves any purpose, let it serve to remind you of that. No more bending to a world that has no idea what you are capable of. It's time to question everything. If you are ready for that, continue. But no, after this video, you may not be able to go back to being the same. When Nietzsche declared that God is dead, he was not being provocative for sport. He did not want to shock the religious or create cheap controversy. What he did was announce the bankruptcy of an entire belief system that had sustained Western civilization for centuries. The death of God is not about the existence or non-existence of a divine entity. It is about the collapse of absolute truths, unquestionable commandments, inherited and unchosen morals. It is the end of the idea that there is a prefabricated meaning to life. And what remains when all of this falls apart? Chaos, emptiness, the vertigo of realizing that there is no longer a ready-made structure to follow, that there is no fixed, eternal good or evil guaranteed by some divine authority. And it is in this abyss that Nietzsche plants the seed of a new possibility, the birth of the Übermensch, the overman. The Übermensch is not a superhero nor a tyrant. It is someone who has transcended the morality of the herd, who no longer needs an external guide to live because they have become the creator of their own values. They do not live seeking approval, do not expect life to have ready-made meaning. They construct that meaning from within. It is someone who does not bow to tradition, but also does not rebel out of childish impulse. They simply do not belong to the common world. Nietzsche saw the human being as a bridge, and not as an end. A bridge between the animal and the Übermensch. And the tragedy of many is that they settle in the middle of the way. They cling to ready-made doctrines, become hostages of inherited ideas, live seeking to fit into a world that rewards conformity and punishes authenticity. And that is why the birth of the Übermensch is painful. Because it demands destruction. It requires burning everything that is old, everything that was accepted without questioning. It is a kind of rebirth that only happens after the symbolic death of what you thought you were. And perhaps you are exactly there, in the middle of this crossing, feeling that the old beliefs no longer make sense, but still afraid to let go of the edge. And that's okay. It is in this conflict that the new can be born. But for that, courage is needed. The courage to abandon the crutch of inherited morality. The courage to walk without maps. Nietzsche did not come to comfort you. He came to challenge you. To say that if you want true freedom, you will need to give up security. You will have to face the void and create something from it. But for that, first, you need to recognize the trap you have been placed in. The most dangerous illusion, that of imposed virtue. And it is precisely about this that we will talk now. About false morality, the virtue that demands, that requires, that binds, and how it may be controlling you, even when you think you are doing good. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. You have been trained to believe that doing good is always right, that being virtuous is synonymous with being moral, that helping others, following rules, fulfilling duties is what makes someone worthy. But Nietzsche invites you to look deeper and see what really hides behind this so-praised virtue. There is a virtue that is not noble, although it is presented as such. It is the virtue that demands, that charges, that paralyzes you with the idea that you must sacrifice yourself all the time, that you need to prove your goodness, that you must show yourself useful, humble, submissive. It disguises itself as altruism, but it is intoxicated with vanity. It makes you say yes when you want to say no. It transforms you into a martyr, and then demands that you take pride in it. Nietzsche clearly saw the trap. This supposed virtue is a social construct made to domesticate the individual. It is a type of morality created not to free the human spirit, but to keep it chained. A morality that arises from the resentment of the weak, those who do not have the strength to assert their own will, and then invent a morality to condemn the strong. Have you noticed how the good live in a state of constant judgment? They are always ready to point the finger. They smile on the outside, but inside, they hope you fall. Because the demanding virtue cannot stand the freedom of others. It feeds on control, recognition, guilt, and the cruelest part? This virtue often lives within you. How many times have you felt guilty for setting your own boundaries? How many times have you refrained from following your most authentic impulse out of fear of seeming selfish? How many times have you negated yourself thinking that this was right? Well, there it is. This is the demanding virtue, the one that forces you to live outward, never inward. That measures the value of a human being by their utility to others, never by their fidelity to themselves. Nietzsche called this the slave morality, a value system created by those who cannot bear the freedom of the strong. It is the morality that teaches that desiring is wrong, that asserting one's own will is arrogance, that living intensely is selfishness. And so, you are educated from an early age to be ashamed of your strength. But there is another way, another virtue, one that does not come from obligation, guilt, or fear of punishment. a virtue that is not built on absence, but on abundance. That does not expect reward because it does not need to. A virtue that demands nothing because it only knows how to give. And it is exactly this virtue that Zarathustra presents in chapter 22, and that we will now explore in depth. Get ready to discover the virtue that arises from abundance, not from scarcity. The virtue that shines like the sun and never asks for applause. At the end of the first part of Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche delivers not a lesson, but a revelation. Chapter 22. Of the virtue that gives is not just a critique of traditional morality. It is a declaration of independence. A clean break from everything we call virtue, but which, in reality, hides fear, dependence, and the need for approval. Zarathustra rises to his highest point, as if he is about to bid farewell to the world. And there, like a prophet who does not preach salvation, but transformation, he reveals what he considers the only virtue worthy of existence, the one that gives. But it does not give because it was commanded. It does not give because it feels guilty. It does not give because it wants to be recognized. It gives because it overflows, because it is full, because it cannot contain its strength. Nietzsche is telling us that true virtue arises from abundance. And that changes everything. Because while traditional morality is based on lack, on what you cannot, on what you must, on what is lacking in you, the virtue that gives arises from excess. It is a flow, a natural spilling of the elevated soul. Zarathustra compares this virtue to the sun. The sun does not choose who it will shine upon. It does not ask for thanks. It does not expect a return. It simply shines because it is in its nature. This is what Nietzsche proposes, that human beings, when they reach a state of inner power, no longer need rules. They act from their essence. They give because they are free. And freedom here is not doing what one wants. It is not needing approval to do what needs to be done. And then comes the sharp critique. You venerate your cup of virtue as if it were the chalice of life, and its content corrupts you. Nietzsche is speaking to you, to me, to all of us. He is saying that what we call virtue is often just disguised pride, a desperate attempt to appear pure, good, moral in the eyes of others. But inside, it is poisoned with vanity, with fear, with control. The virtue that gives, on the contrary, does not want to convince anyone. It does not need to justify itself. It does not need to defend itself, because it does not arise from need. It arises from the overflow of a spirit that can no longer contain itself, and for that reason, it flows. Like the river of Zarathustra, which he wishes to spill both good and evil without distinction, because true giving does not choose, it simply delivers. And after giving everything, Zarathustra announces that he will withdraw. He will return to silence, not out of weakness, but because the spirit that gives needs to renew itself. Because even the noblest, purest, freest virtue one day dies. And it is in this recognition of impermanence that greatness lies, to know how to give and then to depart, without attachment, without dependence. It is here that Nietzsche's vision reaches its most mature form. He is not just talking about ethics. He is talking about a style of existence, a way of being so full that it does not need moral frames. And this leads us to a crucial point. What happens when a human being reaches this state of abundance? What does it mean to live in such a way that giving becomes inevitable? This is what we will see next, diving deep into what Nietzsche really meant by this overflowing virtue. A virtue that does not demand, that does not judge, that simply is. Now that you have understood the contrast between the virtue that demands and the virtue that gives, It is time to dive into the core of Nietzsche's idea. True virtue can only exist where there is fullness. And this is a radical break from everything you have learned so far. You have always been taught that virtue is effort, that being good requires sacrifice, that you need to fight against your impulses, repress your desires, swallow your anger, stifle your will, all in the name of a supposed greater good. But Nietzsche turns all of this upside down. He says, true virtue does not come from effort, it comes from excess. It is not built on self-denial, but on the total affirmation of one's own being. Think of a cup that overflows. That's it. A human being, when whole, when connected with their own essence, their strength, their creation, does not need reasons to give. They give because they cannot contain themselves. They give because they are too alive, because they feel too much, because they are too much. This giving has no agenda. It has no strategy. It is not trying to be accepted. It is not trying to be admired. It simply happens. Like the sun, like the rain, like the art of a true creator. And this requires a brutal change in the way you perceive yourself. Because if you still think you need to strive to be good, then you are still trapped. Because when being is truly full, it does not act out of obligation, it acts out of nature. Nietzsche is proposing an ideal of a human being who does not live out of fear, nor for reward, who does not submit to traditional morality, nor rebelliously reacts against it in a childish way. He proposes the birth of a new type of being, the creator, the one who gives because they are free, the one who acts because they are whole, the one who shines without expecting applause. And perhaps you are feeling discomfort now. Perhaps you are realizing how much of your supposed goodness is still an attempt to please, to protect yourself, to not be rejected. And that's okay. Most people are like that. But now you know. And knowing is the first step to transformation. Because the virtue that gives is not a behavior, it is a state of being. And this state is only possible when you break with the idea that you need to earn your existence. When you understand that there is nothing you need to prove, that you do not need anyone's permission to be yourself, but even this virtue so pure, so authentic, is subject to the laws of life. Nietzsche does not romanticize or idealize. He knows that everything that is born dies, and it is about this impermanence, about the inevitable cycle of life, death and detachment, that we will talk now, because even the virtue that gives needs to know when to let go. If what you're hearing resonates with you, you'll find real value in my ebook, Beyond the Shadow. It breaks down Jung's core ideas and gives you tools to understand yourself more deeply. Link is in the pinned comment. No virtue, no matter how authentic, escapes the cycle of life. Everything that lives dies, everything that blooms withers, and Nietzsche, unlike so many other thinkers, does not try to protect you from this reality. He throws you into it, without cushions, without anesthesia, because it is there, in the acceptance of impermanence, that true freedom begins. Zarathustra, after giving everything of himself, understands that even his virtue needs to die. And there is no sadness in that. There is no despair. There is beauty. There is acceptance. There is wisdom. Because the true creator knows when to stop, knows that even giving needs a pause, that even the sun sets. Nietzsche does not want you to live eternally in a state of blind giving. He wants you to learn to dance with existence, to know how to shine when you are full, but also to know how to withdraw when necessary. Because the being that gives also needs to renew itself, needs to return to the source, needs to die, symbolically, to be reborn with more strength, more clarity, more truth. This cycle is not a weakness. It is a right, a sacred movement. The Creator is not a servant of the world. He does not live giving until he fades away. He gives because he is whole. But when he begins to empty himself, he retreats, he silences, he disappears, because he understands that even giving, if done excessively, becomes contaminated. It turns into addiction. It turns into attachment. It turns into a need to be needed. And here lies the deepest point. Knowing how to give is important. But knowing when to stop giving and accepting the death of what you have created is even rarer. Because the ego wants to eternalize everything, wants to ensure that virtue is remembered, recognized, applauded. But the free spirit knows that this is an illusion, knows that everything true must pass, must flow, must disappear in time, so that something new can be born. Zarathustra does not cling even to his own doctrine. He wants his word to be like a river that pours good and evil over men, and then moves on, without getting stuck, without stagnating, without seeking glory. And this image is too powerful to be ignored, because it invites us to look at our lives and ask, what am I trying to keep alive that should have already died? Perhaps it is an identity, a relationship, a purpose that no longer makes sense, or even a way of living, thinking, being, that has already fulfilled its cycle. Nietzsche challenges you to let go, to release, to not cling even to what is purest in you. And this detachment requires something that few have: inner silence, the ability to step back, to return to oneself, to understand that the spirit that gives also needs to withdraw. This is exactly what Zarathustra does next. He departs, he disappears. He returns to isolation not as an escape, but as a rebirth. And it is about this powerful, necessary, and profound withdrawal, about the creative silence, that we will talk now. Because even the strongest need to rebuild themselves in the void. Zarathustra falls silent, and his silence screams. It screams freedom, it screams maturity, it screams detachment. After giving everything, everything indeed, he chooses to leave. Not out of weakness, but because he knows that even light needs to dim a little to shine with full force again. And this gesture, this voluntary withdrawal, says more about strength than any display of power. Nietzsche understood a truth that few can bear to face. No one can sustain infinite giving without dying inside. The soul that offers too much without pause, without silence, without returning to the source, ends up dry, bitter, resentful. That's why the authentic creator knows how to withdraw. He doesn't need the stage. He doesn't need the audience. He needs the connection to his own source, and this source can only be accessed in silence. But our culture fears emptiness. It is disgusted by silence. It values noise, performance, exhibitionism. The world wants you to always be present, always available, always giving. And if you fall silent, you are forgotten. If you withdraw, you are judged. If you preserve yourself, you are attacked. But Nietzsche shows you another way. The path of conscious isolation. The disappearance that heals. The absence that regenerates. Zarathustra retreats because he has already given everything he could at that moment. And if you are feeling something similar, if you feel you have nothing more to offer right now, that you need air, space, darkness, then perhaps this is your call to stop. Not out of surrender, but out of clarity, out of wisdom. Because true giving only happens when there is a source overflowing behind it. And here is the most important point. Do not be afraid to disappear for a while. Turn off the world. Silence the outside voices. Listen to what is inside you, even if it scares you. It is in this silence that your real power resides. It is in it that you will understand that you don't need to be useful all the time to be valuable. You are, even when you are not doing. You are worth it. even when you are silent. Now, I want you to write a sentence here in the comments. A simple affirmation, a choice, a commitment to yourself. I choose the silence that rebuilds me. Write that. Make it real. And if you can, read what others have written too. Perhaps you will find someone there going through the same as you. And then, continue. Watch the next video. It is essential. And if you have made it this far, you know, it is not by chance.